This is a special video being made to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the bombing of Docker's paint factory.
It was in the early hours of 28th of July 1942 that enemy bombers flew over Ladywood in what was to be the last major raid of the war.
Ladywood has changed a lot in the last 60 years. The aerial photograph taken in the mid-1920s showed the mass of factories and houses.
It was back in 1881 that Dudley Docker and his brother William set up their business in Digbeth. They were, for a time, joined by a third brother, Ludford. All three were well-known cricket players as well as businessmen. Dockers moved to Ladywood and quickly expanded along Grattan Park Street. The 1942 bomb destroyed the newest part of the factory called the Standard Mill, which had been built here. It was called this because it made paint for the Standard Car Company. This 1949 film, taken at the factory, shows a Standard car being painted by Bert Treadwell. Bert started at Dockers in 1932 and is now in his 80s.
War started. How dramatically did the business change?
Well, of course, you could say the car stuff virtually disappeared. So it was aircraft paint and camouflage. I had to learn that and then eventually show them how to camouflage.
So it was mainly camouflage paint that was made?
That's right, yeah.
Bert was a member of the Home Guard and is pictured on this boat on the canal in 1940.
Then they changed it to Home Guard and we had some training for that. Then they scrapped that lot because they realised that the fire brigade we'd got was okay, but only a small number of people. We were asked to form a much larger fire brigade. That was hard work, you know, because in those days there's no posh equipment like today. You had a huge hose which was very heavy, for me anyway, because I wasn't tremendously strong. And you've got to run with it, you see, run like heck.
The fire service was severely tested on the 28th of July 1942 when raiders were spotted over Ladywood.
This is Gordon. You were my age at the time. What was it like?
Well, my father awoke my sister and my brother and the family early in the morning, probably about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, and told us to come down and look at the flare path. It was like a runway in the sky. The planes used to follow the flares, and when they came to the end of the flare path, they were used to release the bombs. And they, as soon as I'd got sort of taken it all in, then there was a whoosh and an almighty bang. And you could also see three very brave firemen right on top of very high ladders pouring water down into the fire, hoping to put it out.
We could see the firemen right up in the flames on these big turntables, directing the water into the flames. And the searchlights was floating around, and you could see the actual planes coming down. There must have been dive bombers, but the firemen, they'd come from Coventry, Nuneaton, Stoke, because all these names of these borough fire brigades was painted on the sides, and they was all in Incknell Port Road and down Rotten Park Street supporting the Birmingham City Fire Brigade, which must have been completely exhausted. And you could see these whilst the explosions were going up and these cans of paint were shooting up in the air and landing in various streets around Incknell Port, as Harold says, Wood Street. These firemen were very brave because they was up on these turntables. There was three. Then they must have fetched one down because it was obviously quite dangerous because they were still bombing into the factory.
And that was terrible, oh dear. Of course we were living far from it. We really thought we'd go up that night, it was awful. Flames were terrible. You might know how paint would burn. It was awful.
The Standard Mill, which was the newest part of the factory, was destroyed. A number of firefighters from the neighbouring firm of Wiggins were killed when a war collapsed on them. 2 nights later, in a follow-up raid, another fireman was killed when an incendiary bomb fell nearby. He died later from his injuries.
This is a picture of Ted Grice. He was a fireman at Dockers at the time. His daughter, Josie, remembers.
My dad was on duty that night, and I can remember him telling me when the bombs hit Dockers, because he was a fireman, that it was terrible down there. Men was killed, all the varnish and the paint was all flooded in the street, and I can remember him saying that his mum and my mother, who he wasn't married to at the time, were waiting at the top of the road to see if he was alive or whether he'd been killed through the bomb. But fortunately, he lived to tell the tale that people did lose their lives, but he was able to help some of the people by trying to contain the fire that night.
Dated the 27th of August 1942 from the Ministry of Aircraft Production Express.
Appreciation of the gallant behaviour of the fire brigade and others who assisted on the night.
The deaths were noted with
Deepest regrets.
And the company
Arranged to pay the sum of £25 to each of the wives of the deceased men.
It was decided to erect a plaque in memory of those who were killed, and this was placed near the spot where they died. Today, the rebuilt Standard Mill is called the Lewis Mill, named after a former works director, Charles Lewis Esquire. The plaque was unveiled at a ceremony held in July 1948. This is the main part of the building that was bombed. This is where the plaque used to be, but it was taken down for cleaning. And this is the plaque.
When the plaque was unveiled in 1948, the roof had not been put on the covered yard. It was completed the following year. That is why the date zone up here says 1949.
Inside the factory, there is more evidence of enemy action. We found these shrapnel marks.
in the mill, there are still a number of twisted girders.
We found evidence of an underground air raid shelter came to light over 20 years ago when a workman came across the entrance to it when digging this trench. The underground tanks, which local people feared could explode but didn't, were filled in beneath our feet. The ventilation pipes and numbers indicate where they used to be.
In 1949, Dockers made this publicity video showing paint being manufactured in the new Lewis mill. Today, the area is almost deserted and not used. This was their state-of-the-art lorry.
It was filmed from up here, but the lorry came through here. In 1949, they were testing paint samples for cars.
Similar activities are taking place.
For instance, this is a bumper of a Range Rover, and this of Alfa Romeo.
Hello.
They are also working on paints for mobile phones.
Thank you.
In 1949, they were not the safety rules and equipment that they have today. The technology has improved a great deal since those early days. Panels are tested, and even the sparkle of the paint and the way it is affected by light is tested. Today, Dockers is part of a large US-based company called PPG Industries.
Today, the future of the company is uncertain. For now, at least, the name Dockers lives on through the PPG tankers, which are still seen on the streets of Lakewood. From TNT News, good night.